All right, so we're officially preparing to, okay, so we're setting up the stream. Now there will be a 20-second delay on the live stream. Okay, great. All right, so we're officially preparing to, okay, so we're set. There we go. The 20-second delay kicking in. All right, let me try sharing my screen here.
I've stopped sharing.
Remember, come January 1, 2020, the government will impose a ban on the manufacture, distribution, and use of expanded polystyrene foam products used in the food and beverage industry. Foam food containers do not break down. They end up in our environment, stifling our animals, plant life, and livelihoods too. Refuse single-use foam food containers. Start using reusable or recyclable food containers. The ban on expanded polystyrene foam products used in the food and beverage industry is effective as of January 1, 2020. Preserve our land. Support the plastic ban. Contact the National Environment and Planning Agency for more information. Hey, ready to eat? Remember, come January 1, 2020, the government will impose a ban on the manufacture, distribution, and use of expanded polystyrene foam products used in the food and beverage industry. Foam food containers do not break down. They end up in our environment, stifling our animals, plant life, and livelihoods too. Refuse single-use foam food containers. Start using reusable or recyclable food containers. The ban on expanded polystyrene foam products used in the food and beverage industry is effective as of January 1, 2020. Preserve our land. Support the plastic ban. Contact the National Environment and Planning Agency for more information.
Make Jamaica plastic free.
Plastic free, me say.
Refuse, reduce, reuse.
Let me tell you this, no plastic bag no fi use.
No.
Reusable tote bag that you fi choose.
Yo, this is candle bag. Make sure that get cut. Just be YOB and bring a one back.
So I'm gonna put my garbage.
Garbage bag still a keep.
Refuse, reduce, reuse. Let's make Jamaica plastic free.
Plastic free, me say.
Refuse, reduce, reuse.
Let me tell you this, no plastic bag no fi use.
No.
Reusable tote bag that you fi choose.
Yo, this is candle bag. Make sure that get cut. Just be YOB and bring a one back.
So I'm gonna put my garbage.
Garbage bag still a keep.
Refuse, reduce, reuse. Let's make Jamaica plastic free.
Plastic free, me say.
Refuse, reduce, reuse.
Let me tell you this, no plastic bag no fi use.
No.
Reusable tote bag that you fi choose.
Yo, this is candle bag. Make sure that get cut. Just be YOB and bring a one back.
So I'm gonna put my garbage.
Garbage bag still a keep.
Refuse, reduce, reuse.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bartley. Ladies, gentlemen, welcome to the National Environment and Planning Agency's hosting of a special seminar which will focus on sargassum solution. Sargassum is an issue across the Caribbean and sections of the Western Hemisphere. And today we have two experts from our Caribbean region who will share with us the solution to sargassum. They'll tell us what is sargassum, what is happening in their region, and what are the possible solutions, and what have they been doing in their region. So our guest today is Professor Mona Weber. She's a marine biologist. She has 30 years experience in the field. She is a senior chair of the Environmental Management Unit at the University of the West Indies and the director of the Center of Marine Sciences. Dr. Weber, welcome. We are very pleased to have you sharing with the National Environment and Planning Agency this morning. And our second guest, who we'll hear from in a little while, is an entrepreneur from our sister island over there in Barbados. He is Joshua Ford. He is a chief executive officer of a special company, Red Dot Compost. So we're going to learn more from our colleagues in research, in entrepreneurship, what is happening in the world of the environmental world, what is sargassum, and why are we experiencing this phenomena in our Caribbean region. First, I'm going to go over to our guest from the University of the West Indies, Professor Mona Weber. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. And shall I proceed to share my screen?
Absolutely, Professor.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I think you're now seeing my slides, and I was invited to speak about what we've been doing with sargassum at the University of the West Indies, the kind of research that we've been conducting. And I will mention a little bit about what is sargassum, but the primary focus is to talk about the Jamaican experience with this weed, especially from a research perspective, because thanks to NEPA, we started looking at sargassum and formed a research group, and we focused on valorization of the sargassum. So it's a little bit of an update on the research and the potential for what my colleague will speak about that they have been actualizing in the Eastern Caribbean. So I think most people know sargassum started showing up in Jamaica around 2011, but it was not until about 2014-15, really 2015, that we started to take notice. The quantities at that time were quite high, and the North Coast in particular was affected. This is a picture of Discovery Bay Marine Lab on the North Coast, done by Nashika Gaya, a student there at the time. North and South Coasts were being affected, and by 2018, we had quantities in Jamaica that were said to be unprecedented. And not only were the quantities huge, the inundation at the time was continuous. Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean. We responded, NEPA did collections and cleanups at various beaches funded by the Tourism Enhancement Fund and in partnership with UDC and others. And the responses had to be measured because you don't want to damage the beach. Now in 2021, we're still having huge quantities of sargassum. May of this year was actually said to be 6% more. We had 6% more biomass than the equivalent May in 2018. So it's been said all over the Caribbean, and the person who's giving focus to this phenomenon says, thinks sargassum is here to stay. And that's very important to note, because we and our global partners throughout the Caribbean and our global partners have had to respond. This has been called phenomenal. We are part of what is now the Great Atlantic Sargassum Belt. And so you cannot ignore what is happening to our beaches and in our waters. And I alluded to the fact that NEPA contacted our faculty and asked us to give attention to this issue. And so we formed a Sargassum research group with the mandate to explore the potential and potential commercial uses of Sargassum. So we started, we knew very little about the algal biomass. We knew very little about the species. We started collecting and studying Sargassum. We were looking at the spatial differences, whether the Sargassum in Negril was different from that on the North Coast, as opposed to that on the East Coast. We collected in Palisados on the South Coast, Fort Rocky, and along Hellshire. And we literally had to learn quickly. We had to learn, like, what is Sargassum? It's a brown alga. It actually has a range of species and types, but the holopelagic form, the form that floats in the water column that is causing the problem now, really has two species. This alga is normally found in the Sargasso Sea off Bermuda, and it started becoming a problem in the Caribbean in 2011. And so we learned about the different morphotypes. Sargassum fluitans can have 2 morphotypes. Sargassum natans can have 4. But the ones that are causing the problem or bringing the resource to our doorstep are Sargassum natans 1 and 8 and Sargassum fluitans 3. I'll mention natans and fluitans again, but we literally had to learn how to distinguish these algae that superficially look similar, because we found that they had different composition, different chemical constituents. So you need to learn what your resource has before you can use it effectively. So we studied the chemical profile of these different species and types. And we found that the nitrates and the phosphates and the iron, they're rich in nutrients. Those nutrients are very much present. And they also had interesting compounds like alginates and fucoidans. I'll talk about those in a little bit. And the different species and types had different ratios. So based on our preliminary studies, very preliminary, we thought Sargassum natans had the greatest potential for valorization, for being able to use this algal biomass. So the literature also taught us that the Eastern Caribbean gave attention to this issue long before we did, as they began being inundated, beaches were being covered long before we were. And so persons had started exploring use as animal feeds. The Sargassum actually creates a healthier rumen habitat in ruminants, and so they produce less methane if they're fed quantities of Sargassum. Cosmetic industry, agriculture, it has nitrates and phosphates. Biofuel could be produced from the Sargassum. Food, bioplastic could be produced. And of course, the famous Sargassum house in Mexico, which is 60% cheaper using Sargassum made bricks. So these by 2018, these were well-established uses. So my colleagues and I in the research group at the University of the West Indies decided to look at how we categorize the potential use of Sargassum. And this was driven primarily by Dr. Howard Reed and a colleague, Thierry Channon at the University of York. They looked at separating into high volume, so using large quantities of the biomass in relatively low value applications. So for fertilizer or for biogas generation. And then using high volumes again, number 2, but medium value. And this is where we looked at extracting complex carbohydrates and the alginates and so on for use in the food industry. And then thirdly, we looked at low volume, high value. So small quantities of the different species and their potential for producing bioactive compounds for medical use. And so currently, we are looking at a little bit at all 3 of those. We have done some work and are doing work with the Scientific Research Council. They are using sargassum in biodigestion, and they're looking at the biomethane potential currently. But the plan is to scale up and potentially use sargassum and pig slurry in home biodigesters. A 50-50 ratio is being shown by their experiments to be ideal. So we hope to scale up and continue these experiments. We at the university have done some work with crops, and we've been using tomato and corn, but corn in particular, the research done with that showed significantly higher biomass produced with the sargassum, and this was in the compost form. And of course, we want to take these experiments further. Marketable yield was not significantly different, but we want to explore that. We have had students from UTEC, Appleton Hall and Stephanie Linton Shields, looked at extracting from the sargassum using water, and a liquid extract was used to water plants, again, corn and tomato, with very, very positive results. So we thought if this is a fertilizer and we produce mangroves for restoration, perhaps we could use sargassum in the mangrove nursery. So at Discovery Bay, we tried sargassum in different proportions in the nursery. It was not as successful in the wet nursery, but certainly in the dry nursery, we have seen the potential for sargassum compost as a fertilizer. And when you're trying to do mangrove restorations in places like the Palisados, where there isn't a lot of organic matter, it's fairly sandy, we see the potential for using the sargassum in this regard. But we are doing tests right now. We have sent away the mangrove plants, or powders of it, and the compost that we used, as well as the soil, to test for heavy metals and arsenic concentrations. We've done a little bit of high volume, low value use, where we have extracted alginates, and the student tried using sargassum in bioplastics, and that is still being worked on. But what I found very interesting, my colleagues at the Natural Products Institute at the UWI have used sargassum extracts on cancer cells. So they've treated prostate and breast cancer cells. The extract now used we used organic solvents, methane and dichloromethane, to extract the compounds from the sargassum. And the highest effect was the extract with sargassum fluitans using methanol. So those experiments need to be expanded, need to be replicated, and they are in the process of getting funding to expand as we seek to confirm and to do more in this regard. So while we think valorization is the answer, and the balance of valorization, if you can get some high-priced compounds, and you can also use the algal biomass in large quantities, then you can pay for the cleanup and for the collection. There are challenges. We worry about the heavy metal, the natural heavy metals in the sargassum plant, or alga, sorry, and it absorbs, it takes up toxins when it's in the environment. It is episodic. we're not sure sometimes. Some years it's not there. Sometimes it's not in certain places. And so we've thought of exploring storage. We need to be able to predict when sargassum will come, and we need to be able to collect it efficiently so we do not damage our beaches. Collection of sea is recommended, but large scale collection will have to be explored if we're going to use this in mass. And as you can see, Mexico, Barbados, the DOMREP, they're well ahead of us in this regard. They're collecting huge quantities and commercializing the sargassum. We are working in partnership with the University of Southampton, and Cave Hill is also involved, a SARTRAC project. MGI here is trying to predict where sargassum will beach consistently so we can know which beaches to protect, as well as where to focus our collection efforts. And these correspond to areas we've been collecting sargassum from over the last few years. So potential for valorization, you can call it a solution, yes. It's a beautiful coincidence. I'm quoting what a colleague at Cave Hill said. There's a beautiful coincidence that the ocean is providing all this biomass, and it's a shame not to use it. And some of us wish it would go away, but if we can use it, we can fund the cleanups and we can fund persons who have a difficulty with it landing on their shores. So we think valorization, yes, is a significant part of the solution. Thank you for listening, and our partners and funders are shown.
Truly, this has been quite a bit of positive information, quite a few solutions presented to us by you, Professor Mona Weber. And one of those solutions you mentioned was entrepreneurship. And so now I'm going to turn to our colleague in Barbados at Red Diamond Compost Limited. Joshua Fort is the CEO of this company. And so he's going to share with us what has he been able to accomplish in Barbados as a part of his solution to the sargassum issues that we're having in the Caribbean coastal areas. Over to you, Joshua.
Thank you, Eva, and thank you all for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be able to present to you the work that we've been doing at Red Diamond. And first off, I'd actually like to share a bit of the Red Diamond story and how we even got started in working with sargassum to begin with. And just making sure you can see my screen.
Yes, we can. We're seeing your screen.
Okay, great. So for me, looking at sargassum was probably from a different perspective as most people when it arrived. And that has to do with simply what the purpose of Red Diamond Compost has been since its inception. So we are a biotech social enterprise that focuses on creating clean and green organic and biologic agrochemicals. So they're made primarily from organic waste materials, anything made from plant or animal sources, essentially. So back in 2012, I would have been going through my own health crisis and actually dealing with that situation where I was trying to improve my health and try to learn more, to understand more about nutrition. It led me to a place of learning about nutrient-dense foods. And from there, I went down the rabbit hole of looking at how our foods were actually grown here in Barbados and across the world, where the majority of our foods are imported. And realizing this similar trend of the use of toxic synthetic chemicals in agriculture and in the foods that we consume. And at the same time, there was so many different articles and press releases coming out about the rising cases of NCDs in Barbados and the Caribbean, and especially amongst our youth. And I even had a young lady in my own community, a young girl, only 9 years old, losing her life to one of these diseases. So with the experiences that I had gone through in starting to actually improve my health, focusing more on plant nutrition. And then these different occurrences that were happening at the same time, I kind of rose this conviction in me that this is the area that I needed to focus on, being able to produce solutions that, you know, create that abundance of rich, nutrient-rich soil and nutrient-rich plants. So thankfully, I would say through my process, I was able to get a mentor early on, a soil scientist from Texas who's been a soil scientist for 25 plus years now. And he really started to guide me and mentor me along how to go about, say, developing this idea I had for red diamond compost. So it was from the early stages, it was a lot of research, literally learning the sciences around creating these types of solutions, but also the agricultural industry, understanding how our food was produced, the sources of the inputs and everything that was used. And it kind of gave us this entire roadmap of our blueprint, really, of what the landscape surrounding our food and the environment and our health really looked like. And we were actually able to see how these things interconnected. And for me, it was truly amazing to see the similarities between, studying actual human health and nutrition and looking at the soil. And there were so many similarities that you could see there. So how do we then deal with this challenge of these toxic synthetic chemicals in our foods, in our soils that are damaging our environment, that are negative impacts on pollinating insects, that are polluting our same oceans, and could be potentially contributing to these blooms of sargassum that we were seeing? Now, when, say, in late 2014 into 2015, here in Barbados, where the huge mats of sargassum started to pile up, at that time is when I decided to shift gears from where I was focusing on initially and use the sargassum because the material was in such abundance. And again, it was toward my goal of how do I create the best soil environment for plants to be able to reach their full genetic potential, to be able to have as much nutrient holding capacity and be able to provide that for us to consume. So sargassum, as we all know, and as you guys know in Jamaica, with it on your shores right now, the stigma that it carries with it, the strong stigma, the problems that come with it. People see it as a nuisance, a huge headache, a health hazard even. Some of our communities are even still plagued seasonally by the sargassum because it's in some areas that are very, very hard to move, especially without damaging the beaches. So while everyone was looking at sargassum and it arrived as this huge headache, for me, it was a whole different story. And this quote here is kind of the principle that I was following. So for results to be achieved, resources must be allocated to opportunities rather than problems. So it's essentially looking at this situation that we are seeing on our shores as this huge problem and this huge headache, but rather thinking of it from a solution perspective. What solutions can we come up with to deal with this situation that could benefit us socially, economically, and otherwise? So this was where I started my research and digging up tons and tons of research papers, anything to do with sargassum seaweed, wherever in the world it was. And that included not only the sargassum fluitans and natans that we have in our region, but all the different other varieties around the world as well. So what similar work was done? Because at this early time, you're talking, 2015, like there really was not much information at all available. So it was going based on just what I could find, some of it pretty old research, but also even research on similar seaweeds and algae to understand how it actually functions and what precautions we may need to take in developing a solution from it. So in the images here, you could see the issues that we would be familiar with. And this was on our coast here in Barbados. We see sea turtles dying. We had the mahi-mahi dying and being literally choked up in the sargassum. The huge mats of it literally killing the coastal marine life. And then you have us starting to go and literally collect the sargassum and starting to concoct our various solutions and doing our own in-house trials and testing. Now, for me, it was a very long haul to get people even interested in looking at sargassum from the solution perspective. And I would go literally on our East Coast early in the morning and see an entire coastline covered completely in sargassum, and wondering why I was the only person out there looking to do something with this material. You know, because again, for us, plant material is gold. And it was through various processes, various trial and error, doing our testings and so on, that we came to develop our super seaweed biostimulant from the Sargassum seaweed. And here pictured are two other products that we carry that are not necessarily primarily from Sargassum, but they're plant-based and animal-based solutions as well. For our super seaweed biostimulant, we had given some of it to UWE campus here for them to conduct some trials. And with us looking to market it specifically as a biostimulant, which is more like a supplement for plants and not necessarily a main fertilizer, what they saw in using it compared to a very popular synthetic fertilizer is that with the biostimulant on its own, we had a nearly 40% increase in overall plant production. This was with sweet pepper crops compared to the synthetic fertilizer by itself. But even by cutting the synthetic fertilizer by half and adding our super seaweed biostimulant to it, it still had even greater results. So again, this goes to looking to reduce the use of these different toxic synthetic chemicals that are not that don't create a positive environment for the beneficial microbes in the soil, which is what our solutions are designed to work with. So doing this work with the sargassum has been the main focus for Red Diamond over the past few years. And with that, we've been able to compete in various competitions and attend various entrepreneurship events across the world, from the Young America's Business Trust Caribbean Innovation Competition, from the Global Entrepreneurship Summit held by the US and the Netherlands back in 2019, the Climate Launch Plaid, Green Tech Competition, and various others. But the goal for us is the model that we've actually designed, kind of using, piggybacking off of sargassum and developing our broader model and our broader goal for bioconversion of these organic materials. We've created a model and a system that we're looking to duplicate in any given territory where, again, organic resources are available. So anything from a plant material like sargassum or otherwise, could be any other invasive plant species, organic waste materials, and those derived from animals as well, like fish offal, and so on. So again, the goal for us, and the main driver for us, was how do we not have this image being the future of my own generation and the future generations to come. Not having food that is so toxic that you need this level of protection to consume it, but having an environment that is rich and diverse in the foods that we consume. So, for me, it was taking that leap of faith, taking that first step out to actually create something, see if it works, see what happens, see what we can learn from it, and continue developing it from there. And again, I know what kind of is missed sometimes is the actual research and the data that Professor Weber would have highlighted. That information is so critical and crucial. It's really the foundation of entrepreneurs like myself being able to develop solutions from sargassum or any other types of materials. And it is, in those early years where I really wish, the structure of the institutions, the academic institutions, were kind of hyper-focused on this model of conducting research in these areas and being able to, create value from them, create the economic value from them that we're kind of seeing now and realizing with the sargassum. So it's something that goes hand in hand where, the research is foundational to the entrepreneurs being able to actually act and execute. But, by no means, for us entrepreneurs, by no means are we able to kind of wait until all of that information is collected or all the research is done. But, especially when it comes to sargassum, I say, for persons who are interested in working with it in any sort of agricultural, pharmaceutical, in any type of in-depth type of way, there's certain precautions, that needs to be taken when dealing with the material, as Dr. Weber said. It's kind of a sponge in the ocean, collecting, soaking up all these different types of materials. So these are some of the things that needs to be paid attention to for persons looking to work with the sargassum. Thank you.
And thank you, Joshua Ford, over there in Barbados. This morning here at the National Environment and Planning Agency, we have Science Meets Entrepreneurship, and our guest speakers thus far has been Professor Mona Weber. She is a scientist, a marine biologist, and she has been conducting and leading research here in Jamaica on sargassum. We also just heard from our colleague in Barbados, Joshua Ford, CEO of Red Diamond Compost. On our YouTube channel, we have guests who are joining us from West Palm Beach, Puerto Rico, and right here in Portland Cottage, Jamaica. So we have questions for you, our speakers. First question comes to us from our colleague in Portland Cottage. And Junior Powell wants to know, how can fisher folks work more closely with you in terms of manufacturing products from this natural resource called sargassum?
Thank you. I think, and this is something that I was considering and thinking about for a very, very long time, where our fisher folk here in Barbados were going through a very rough time, because there wasn't any fish for them to go. They couldn't go and play their trade. And there was only sargassum completely smothering the coastline. And it's getting to that point where the idea is, okay, how can the fisher folk go from, fishing for fish, but actually start fishing for sargassum? Because the collection part of it is, when we're talking about the production line, the collection part of it is one of the most tedious processes. And being able to do that efficiently and effectively while maintaining the integrity of our coastal environment is extremely important. So we here have been looking at models of more manual collection, not necessarily using the heavy machinery, of harvesting near shore sargassum, using fishing vessels, using the fishing boats, using the pontoons and nets to actually get this done. For us, the extraction process, we create a very concentrated extract. So the value that we're able to get out of, say, one ton of wet sargassum is quite a lot. So I think this, for us or for any other entrepreneur looking at this, working out the economics of it is like the hardest part of it, because we have to make it worthwhile for the fisher folk to go out there and actually harvest it, and still for us to be able to go through our production process and have a product that we can take to market at a competitive price. So working out that economics of it is something that is still kind of in the process, and we're still like seeing what works best. But I think getting to a point where we can have some type of standard, whether it is say a facility like mine, being able to purchase the sargassum from fisher folk at an agreed price, or having some other type of arrangement is key. But definitely there's a huge opportunity there.
Indeed. So we're seeking out the opportunities as we speak about Sargassum Solution this morning on our NEPA Jamaica YouTube channel. We also have someone who was asking us on our YouTube chat, and this person says, what happens to sargassum once it's cleaned from the beaches currently in Jamaica and Barbados? Now, you heard about some of the research solutions that's taking place. Perhaps this person joined us a bit late. Let's give a quick recap. Prof, do you want to share with this person what happens?
Yes. Well, first off, I think they are referring to the large-scale collections that may have been done by NEPA, by others. And what is really the easiest thing to do is to remove the sargassum from the beachfront, where it's going to get wet, where it's going to decay, and the hydrogen sulfide is going to be produced. And I don't know if you've seen this dark brown water or red brown water that is now at Helsha, which is very low in oxygen because the sargassum is decaying in the water. The idea is to get it away from the edge, from the water's edge, and it's piled primarily against the dunes. Because in reasonable quantities, sargassum is very useful for helping to trap sand and helping to build up the dunes. So those large-scale, really beach cleanups we're piling the sargassum against the dunes, and it will naturally break down and really help to replenish the dunes. The other collections, of course, we do, as my colleague indicated, we have to do at sea or even in the foreshore before the material beaches. And that we are using for the composting and the extracting, as was mentioned. So the key thing is to collect the material before it piles up on the beach. That is the challenge.
All right. So though we have solutions, we still have our challenges. And we have a colleague over in Puerto Rico. And he says he's looking forward for Puerto Rico to working closer with other Caribbean partners as we forge forward to create new local economies and healthier oceans related to sargassum. Yes, wonderful. Jeremy Long is saying, thank you, Professor. You understood me. Thank you. He's quite grateful. So this morning, we're discussing sargassum solutions here on our YouTube channel. We'd like you to, of course, subscribe. We want you to click. So whenever we have new notifications, we encourage you to join us here on NEPA's, National Environment and Planning Agency's new channel. What have we been learning so far? Prof taught us about the research which is being done, not just in Jamaica, but she also gave us examples, cosmetics, biofuel, and we're learning from our colleague, Joshua Ford at Red Diamond, the compost. He had an issue, he had a problem, and so he wanted a solution. And so he delved into research as well. What is the future? What does the future of sargassum look like for our Caribbean countries? How are we going to manage? Does anyone care to share with us what the projections are in terms of managing sargassum? I know my presenters are smiling.
I will quickly go first. I really liked what, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your name, Joshua. I really liked what Joshua said about the partnership with academia and entrepreneurs. The university is developing an entrepreneurship center and so on. But while we do that, we really need the ideas and the arms and legs of persons like Joshua they have the energy and they have the focus to use our research, but also to help us focus our research. So we go at a problem and we look at everything and then we try and see what is worth studying. But we could go off on a tangent if we don't have the persons who have the entrepreneurial ideas to say, I would like to use it to do this. how can you focus your study in this particular area? So those students from UTech, Stephanie and Capleton, they looked at adding the liquid sargassum and compared it to synthetic fertilizer, and they had their control, and they actually produced quite good data on the value of the thing without using synthetic fertilizers. And that was always their passion. We want to get away from synthetic fertilizers. But who would take that from us? Joshua is running with it. And so it's very critical that the partnership for the future of the Sargassum solutions, the partnership has to be there between academia and the entrepreneurs and the end users.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. And you know, further to that, I see, you know, we see all the different opportunities of what can be done with sargassum. It's a very versatile material, a very versatile plant, and I mean, it's really, like I said, when I go to the coast and I see all of that sargassum, it's like gold on it washing up on the beaches, essentially. So it's in our hands for us to do with it. You know, the opportunity is in our hands for us to do something with it and make something with it. And you know, right now with everything, all the focus on combating climate change and sustainability and health, I see us being able to really develop our blue economies in the region. Heavily with sargassum is something that is like, if there's anyone out there that isn't working with sargassum, looking at sargassum, I would say, hey, turn your attention this way, because this is, you know, this is like our different black gold for us.
The Caribbean's black gold. Wonderful. We have another comment, and this time, well, we have a question. And Donovan Hay is asking, are there specialist equipment that can be used to harvest sargassum from the beaches while minimizing damage to the beach environment?
So there is. So it's kind of a yes to it, but it's with conditions. It's tricky. So when we were engaging some of the companies that were developing solutions or had other you know, algal collection solutions from France and so on, who were looking to present it to us. And one thing, like the first thing that we realized is the environmental conditions, the weather conditions are drastically different. And those conditions actually determine whether or not the equipment that is being suggested would be actually effective or not, or would it even be safe to use or not. So, and this is why I would say for us who have already started out in the area, things have been moving slowly on that part, because other than like the images that Dr. Weber would have shown of our collection vessels at sea, there's not been much other you know, innovations or new developments happening in terms of being able to economically you know, harvest the sargassum at sea. It is again like another economics, you know, issue of it when you're looking at investing in this piece of equipment. So like those vessels that you would have seen are very, very, very expensive. So for this being such an early industry that's now being developed, it is like, for persons like myself, it is hard work trying to get governments or investors, convincing them to see, you know, that this is actually a viable investment for the next, you know, 10, 20 years, and it's worthwhile to actually invest in these different types of equipment. But still identifying the ideal equipment is still a very difficult and early process.
Thank you to our guest. We are live on our NEPA's YouTube channel as we share with our guests across the region sargassum solutions. This morning, we have learned of science, how science has embraced entrepreneurship. And so we have solutions out of Barbados and Jamaica as we explore other alternatives to the use of sargassum. Prof, I was very impressed with your mention of the making of bricks. The use of sargassum in construction, that house you mentioned in Mexico. Is that an option for us in Jamaica? Is that something we can duplicate in Jamaica?
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. And again, it would be using large quantities of the sargassum and collects the wet biomass and literally produces the bricks. We need manufacturers to take on this problem. I know we have Avian Morrison, who I gather is setting up to produce sargassum blocks like charcoal to use for fuel, but we need other persons to take on the issue and to produce material. This is extremely valuable. As Joshua says, it's our gold, and it's golden brown. It's perfect. So let's think of ways to use it indeed.
Wonderful, wonderful. We have Kay Johnson, and she's asking, what would the generic financial and industrial necessity look like for our Caribbean countries to be able to stably keep up with these solutions? What would it take for our Caribbean countries to keep up with the possibility of these solutions? Colleagues, are there any projections?
That one, I am not 100% sure on what it would take. I mean, even when we look at our various Caribbean islands, and we had at least 2 Caribbean-wide sargassum symposiums already, and really looking at these solutions and what it would take. But I think where it begins again is in the research that academia is doing, and the focus of actually looking to have investment take place within the industry, within the sector. There's a lot, I mean, even when we look at the pharmaceutical potential of sargassum, there's a lot of value that is within it, right? So it's literally taking it seriously, not just looking at it as a nuisance, and looking to seriously invest in the development of it. Because honestly, and I've already seen signs of it, if we don't, someone else will come from somewhere else and take advantage of it if we don't.
Wonderful. As we're coming to the close of our session, which looked at sargassum solutions, I see more comments are coming in from our YouTube channel. I'm going to take one final question. Prof, this one is directly for you. Our researcher in Portland Bight Protected Area wants to know if you have been coming across other seaweed, such as the thalcia, if you have been seeing it building up on our beaches. Have you been observing that?
Thalcia?
THELASSIA.
Oh, he's referring to
Thalassia.
thalassia. Ah, yes, that is seagrass, the broad strap-shaped seagrass. You've been seeing a lot of thalassia come up along with the sargassum, because the very rough seas are actually damaging the thalassia beds. So this is another issue entirely. We've been having very rough weather, and our reefs, of course, are not as protective as they used to be. So the seagrass beds are being damaged, and you're seeing sargassum biomass. Now, the interesting thing is many collectors, many persons who use the sargassum, once there is other plant biomass with it, it's perfectly usable. If you're not using it for very meticulous extractions and so on, it's plant biomass. And so the whole mass can be used.
Awesome. I hope that helps our colleague over in the Portland Bight Protected Area. We do have an evaluation instrument. We haven't had many takers for the evaluation instrument, but thus far persons have been indicating to us, yes, they like both presentations. and they are interested in other topics relating to mangroves and protected areas. We also have some educators with us. We have fisher folk with us, and we have other researchers with us. So this has been our session focusing on sargassum solutions. We heard about the research which Professor Weber is doing. She has been using the sargassum and testing it along with her students. Caperton Hall, I see him in the chat as well, one of her research students. They have been doing research looking at how they can use sargassum to improve mangrove growth. And we heard from Barbados, our colleague Joshua Fort, CEO of Red Diamond Compost, of the work they've been doing. I'm particularly enthused in this October when we focus on cancer, that research is also taking place with the pharmaceutical industries, and they have been looking at what they can, and the extracts can be used for breast cancer and prostate cancer. There is, of course, much more work to be done, and we are hearing of the opportunities that are also available here in the Caribbean. And we have partners online. Puerto Rico and Florida are interested in working closer with us. So this has been quite a bit of a fruitful morning. We see more connections across the Caribbean as well. We invite you to join us this Friday morning as we will hear from Professor Mona Weber as she focuses on another aspect to her research here in Jamaica, microplastics. And she will be joined by Donovan Hay from the CCAM Foundation, as they will focus on microplastics, and Mr. Hay will share with us his research on marine species, specifically our shore birds. So that's going to take place this Friday morning at 10 a.m. We look forward to you joining us. Of course, if you want to hear more from the work that the National Environment and Planning Agency does, and as once it's put out on our YouTube channel, you can be the first to get it. All you have to do is like, click, subscribe right here at NEPA Jamaica. On behalf of the team of the National Environment and Planning Agency and our guest, Joshua Fort, CEO of Red Diamond Compost Limited in Barbados, and our guest professor, Mona Weber, our researcher here at the University of the West Indies. Thank you for joining us for a session on sargassum solutions. See you next Friday. Have a great day, everybody.